Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Biblical Musings. We're going to pick back up where we left off at Nehemiah chapter 6 and kind of do a survey of Nehemiah 6 and 7, kind of getting us into the mid portion of the book. Where we left Nehemiah was he encountered some difficulties from within, from the nobles and such that had possession and usury rights over their brothers and sisters, and it was causing a lot of disharmony and distrust, and it's something they just had to get past as quickly as possible with as little damage as possible so they could continue working on the wall and continuing for the welfare of the all the people and not just a few. As we get into chapter 6, the wall is finished at the end of the chapter, but as we get there, the enemies of Nehemiah, the culprits as you will, show their ugly faces at least one more time. In fact, they're a big threat and nuisance in this chapter. And Nehemiah, by trusting in God and not listening to their lies and to their corruption or their plots, plunges on through and gets through to the first finish line. It's not the complete end goal, but they have a big success in this chapter. So it begins and says, "When it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, to Geshem the Arab, and to the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and there was no breaches remaining in it, although at that time I had not set up the doors and the gates. Then Sanballat and Geshem sent a message to me, saying, 'Come, let us meet together at Keraphim in the plains of Ono.' But they were planning to harm me. So I sent messengers to them, saying, 'I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop when I leave and come down to you?' And so they send him message after message 4 or more times to come meet with him. And they're planning to harm him there, and they start trying to incite him to come with threats and promises. They try everything. They threaten to tell the king that he's plotting to become king and that he's hired prophets to proclaim his name. They do all kinds of things, anything they can do to stop the work and get him to come so they can remove him or anything. They're trying all the tricks in the book to smear his name to the other nations and to the king and to threaten him with those things. And he does not come. He stays and he sends his servants. He will not come. And he's determined to not let these adversities discourage the people from working. As we get through further in the chapter, along about verse 10, he's talking to one of the other Jews, the exiles in Jerusalem, who seems to be someone who's working with the temple or is a prophet of some kind, a spokesperson. And this person says, "I've heard about a plot to kill you. You need to take refuge in the temple for the night." Now, Nehemiah is not a priest. And if you remember anything about the temple and the tabernacle system, there's a holy place which the priests minister in, and they have the table of showbread and the candles and the various things. And then there's the most holy place, which only the high priest is supposed to enter once a year on the Day of Atonement, and not without bringing sacrificial blood. So the temple is a special holy place, signifying the presence of God on earth, and sinful people cannot go in there. You have to have a priest to minister for you. Nehemiah is not a priest or of the line of the priests, so he has no right whatsoever to enter the temple area. Now, it is very secure area, the temple is, but it's not proper. It would indeed be sinful for him to enter there. And so he does not. He does not listen to this man's request, but he finds out with this man entreating him to take refuge there, that this man has been hired by Tobiah and Sanballat and the others to try and get him to sin, so they'll have something to use against him propaganda-wise, we might say. Something to smear his name with that would be true, that he could not deny. And so he asks in verse 14, in praying to God, he says, "Remember, O my God, Tobiah and Sanballat according to these works of theirs, and also Noadiah the prophetess and the rest of the prophets who were trying to frighten me." Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to discourage him, to frighten him, to just beat him up with words and with messages and with fear propaganda, if you will, to stop the work by any means necessary. But he does not. And then we have this amazing passage in verses 15 through 19. It says, "So the wall was completed on the 25th of the month of Elul, in 52 days. Now, in the next chapter, which is kind of a census chapter, it's riveting reading it when you get there. He kind of goes through and counts the remnant who are behind, who are left there in Jerusalem and in the area, and they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 45,000. They have exact numbers, and there's some servants, so I'm kind of rounding in the middle. But in the neighborhoods of 45,000 people. To complete the walls of a whole city from a state of complete destruction and rebuilding to a fortified state in 52 days is honestly nothing short of miraculous. And I encourage you to go look at some of the great construction projects that have taken place in times of antiquity or even in modern times. And it is a miraculous feat. It really is. And they give credit to where credit is due. And the surrounding nations even recognize it in the next verse. It says, when all our enemies heard of it and all the nations surrounding us saw it, they lost their confidence, for they recognized that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Because God is the one who has been moving this whole book to put the people and the resources and everything in place, and they have worked tirelessly day and night, literally, to build this wall. And now they have completed the first stage, as you will. They've completed the wall, but there's still more work to be done, as we'll see in the rest of the book. But they've had a major, major success, and even the surrounding nations recognize where their success is due. It says, also in these days many letters went from the nobles of Judah to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them, for many in Judah were bound by oath to him, because he was related to these various people you'll see in this. He lists them all here. And he says, moreover, they were speaking about his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him. And said, then Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. So we find out here at the end of the chapter that it wasn't just his enemies sending letters to him personally, which was happening, but he was sending letters to all the nobles and rich people of Judah, the leaders, to try and sow dissent in the ranks, if you will. And it seemed to have worked at least a little bit, because they were on his they're his subsidiaries, if you will. They're his vassals, and so they answer to him in a very real way. And so he has inroads into the higher ups of the nation, if you will. But even with all of that, God was able to move miraculously, and they have completed the wall, which is an amazing feat. Moving on into chapter 7, I want to briefly mention some things. They rebuild the wall and set up the doors, and they start getting the Levites and the singers, and he starts delegating some more in this chapter. Because remember, if you remember back to chapter 1 and 2, Nehemiah did not come to Israel to live. He did not come to stay. He heard about their plot, and he wishes to aid them. But he's a little bit like Moses in the wilderness, in that he gets the people out of Egypt, and he gets them the law and all of that, and makes them into mostly a nation. But then he does not go with them into the promised land. He delegates that to Joshua and to Phinehas the high priest, the son of Aaron. But he does not get to go into the promised land. And so Nehemiah is kind of like that, in that he's going to be a transient leader, if you will. He's going to serve for a while, but he knows he must go back to his home and to his master, the king of Persia, someday. So he's delegating some responsibility here. This person's going to be in charge of the temple security, and this person's going to be in charge of the gate security and various things like that. And he's trying to get the people to take care of themselves, which is so very important in any kind of leadership operation, especially in a church leadership operation. If you happen to be leading in that thing, I would always say, make sure that you are not the only thing holding whatever it is, what kind of organization or structure you're a part of. Make sure you're not the only person holding that together, because if you have to leave for some reason, or you pass on, or whatever it is, that structure can so easily fall when the person holding it is gone. And so make sure there are others, there are leaders behind to take up the slack, even if it's something as simple as you move on or you retire. Don't let that work be destroyed just because you have to move on. And so then he gives the list of the names and the genealogies, and much of it's repeated from Ezra. I believe it's chapter 2. I encourage you to read Ezra as well. It's a fantastic book, and it's a companion to Nehemiah It really is. And so then he lists here at the end of chapter 7 some of the donations that came in, large amounts of money from these poverty-stricken people and their nobles to build the wall and build the temple and to reset up the priests with monies and with clothing and all the things necessary for people to live, because the priests don't have land of their own. As you'll remember, they must live off of the welfare of those they serve, which is similar to how some of the church structure works to this day. And so, when the 7th month came, chapter 7 ends with the sons of Israel were living in their cities now. And so, I think that's a great place to end, because it's not the end of the book, and it's not the end of the struggle, but they've had a great success. They've finished the wall. They have overcome adversaries, with Nehemiah leaning solely on God's support and doing the best he can with what he's been given. And now they're finding a little bit of rest for the moment. They have worked ceaselessly for 52 days and a little more, and now they're taking a little bit of a rest from their hard labor. So in summary, and to end us here for this week, I just want to encourage you, if you're going through a difficult time, to remember that sometimes there's rest at the end. Sometimes that's all that can get you through, is thinking about the time where you'll be able to stop and take a breath. And just press on. Lean heavily on God. Lean heavily in prayer, but press on and do something worth doing. But if you've finished a work, also remember to take time to draw a few breaths and to take some rest, because you never know when the next great work may come, when the next great struggle. So take some much needed rest. Then my next chapter we're going to study, chapter 8, is an awesome chapter, I think, and I'm excited for it, because we see some of the blessings that come from being a child of God and his servant. And I think it's really important for us. So I pray you join us next time for that, chapter 8 as well. But remember to take some rest after hard labors. I think that could be very important for all of us at this time. So thank you for joining us. This has been Biblical Musings. Until next time, God bless.